you would be hard-pressed to find a more storied and interesting life than Drew's. He left for Japan, only a child, 8 years old, with his family, and upon immediately arriving in Japan, was enrolled into a Japanese elementary school. No international schools for this kid. It doesn't take much imagination to understand just how difficult that is for a child at 8 years old when so much of your language is already established. It is a monumental challenge, but with the characteristic perseverance that would become so much a signature of Drew that I've seen throughout his entire life, he embraced the challenge and didn't simply learn by grace. He left the country and lost much of what he learned, but then studied incredibly hard in university to regain lost ground, to develop an absolute, from what I can see, mastery of the language. Some people say you sound like a native out of lip service once you reach a certain level. But with Drew, how genuine and how many times I've heard people say that of him is something else entirely. I'd like to finish before we get into the conversation about his business by a phrase that he said recently, which I really took to heart and I found inspiring, was that you are only able to take a ship out on a great adventure for so long in your life, and if you wait too long, you'll pass that opportunity by. Drew is not one to let that ship sail without him on board and with a great crew, and he's done so. So I am excited to be along for the ride, to contribute in any way that I can, and whenever we sit down, it is a fascinating conversation. I hope you enjoy it. This is the Interstice podcast. I'm joined today by Drew. So I wanted to ask you about, here we sit, for those of you on Spotify or iTunes, if you're not checking it out on the channel. This is Garden Lab in Kyoto. This is the shared kind of common space, which sits below the workspace above.
Yep.
And I noticed today, is that next door, they're doing a bunch of renovations. Is that in any way related to what's going on here?
Yeah, it's the same sort of complex. All of this is, there's 5 that are complete already, and there's going to be 4 more added.
Okay.
So it's not all under Garden Lab, but we're hoping to expand as well.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So what, in your own words, not mine, let's talk a little bit about, what is Garden Lab? In less than 2 minutes, how would you describe it?
Garden Lab is, I guess, put simply, it's a co-working space.
Okay.
But that's sort of like the common, sort of the buzzword these days, especially in Japan, is like co-working or shared office. But I think more than that, it's sort of, we actually are, the main thing that we do here is we're sort of the facility managers for all of the units here and the garden in particular, but also we are sort of almost like a launch pad for startups that are coming to Kyoto, or startups that are in Kyoto that are trying to reach a more international audience. So we're kind of the bridge in between that. We support startups, we support established businesses, we facilitate projects that are here. So one that unfortunately with COVID has been delayed a few times already is there's like a traditional Japanese company. They make traditional crafts. I can't really explain too much, but basically, they make fans. They're a fan making company. They've been around for hundreds of years. And the new owner took over. He wanted to do something more international. So we've connected him with some artists from the US. They're going to be coming here. We're going to make some fans together, limited series, sort of like an artist signature series. And they can stay here at Garden Lab. We're going to do production here. We're going to shoot a digital media campaign for them. And then, we're going to help market it globally. So that's like an example of a project we do. And then also there, as you mentioned, is like the work area upstairs. That would be where people who live in Kyoto can do like a remote desk. They can use this as their office where they incorporate, and they use it kind of like as their daily office, 9 to 5 sort of thing. Or folks who are really similar to what I was doing for a long time is being based in Tokyo or somewhere else in Japan, and then coming to visit clients in Kyoto or Kansai. So that'd be Kyoto, Osaka, Kobe, etc. They can come here and be based here for a few days a month, sort of thing. So it's kind of like a remote office as well.
Awesome. I wanted to know too. It's easy to say overnight success,
right.
But everybody
doesn't see what led up to that. Obviously, Pokemon Go comes to mind,
Yes.
where everybody said that was an overnight success, but apparently that game's development was, it was taking years.
Right.
Experienced a bunch of rejections and stuff.
Sure. Yeah.
Where did you first come up with the idea that you wanted to do this?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Over decade success, like over multiple years of success, not overnight. That's for sure. Especially in Kyoto, things take a little bit longer.
So why is that? Is it
Yeah.
it's easy to say, it's cultural.
Yeah, it
and
is.
that almost feels cliche, but then maybe
Yeah.
elaborate on that. Like, let's
Sure.
talk about how different
Yeah.
really is the Kyoto culture, say, for example. I mean, you've lived here for many years.
Yeah, for sure. So it's actually it can be frustrating at times because things do take a little bit longer. But one thing that's really refreshing about it is it's all very human connection based. So that can be, it's kind of a double-edged sword. That can be really frustrating if you don't know the right people or you don't know how to kind of fit in this sort of community. It can be really, that's like a pretty hard barrier for a lot of people. But on the plus side is, if you are here and you make the right kinds of connections and you get to know people and basically just don't act like an asshole, people will then recommend you to other people that are involved in your industry. So a lot of word of mouth, a lot of trust building over time. But ultimately, this project started because I had founded a previous company with my brother in Vancouver, and we needed an office in Japan. So that's why I had joined originally, was to help him launch the company and then start our Japanese subsidiary over here. I was looking in Tokyo. It was cool. There's lots of great opportunities in Tokyo. The city's great. And a lot of our customers and partners were there. But Kyoto is just so much more affordable. It's so much better quality of life, in my opinion. And it's a lot better for creativity and stuff. There's just like a great creative community here, expat community here. And the setting itself is beautiful, in my opinion. But anyway, so I started looking here because I'd gone to school and I'd gone to grad school here. And I realized I had this connection with architecture, and it's the same landlords that have now created this second phase. The first phase is actually just across the street, and I started our office there. So we actually did a video there a couple of years ago.
Yes.
Yep, the house tour. Yep.
Where we didn't show the kitchen or the bathroom.
And endless hate still comes in to this day, so we can go catch that another time. But yeah, basically we started the office there. It went really, really well. And through that, I got to know the landlord really well. And we built a great relationship over about 3-4 years. And then through that, she had mentioned that she had these other properties that she needed to develop. And it's really cool because they've been sitting empty for 30, 40 years.
Wow.
And they were already very old, so about 100 years old. And they've been empty for, 40% of that time.
Right.
So they're all crumbling and falling into themselves. But she had been waiting that they could do a proper, faithful renovation instead of just selling them for the land value.
Right, to have them flipped into some new hotel or something. So was that part? Did she really want to keep the Machia? Yes. She did. Okay, yeah. I see.
Exactly. So right away, not only did I know her for a long time and really respect her, and we had a great relationship in just sort of a friendly way, also seeing that she was willing to hold off on, because this part of town is amazing. It's right downtown.
Really central.
Yeah, you could sell this land for millions of dollars.
Right.
And I mean, without being rude about it, their place is very old as well, unrenovated, They could use that money and just build some beautiful brand new home.
True.
Which is really typical in Kyoto. They kind of flip an old place or their parents' house and then use that money to build a nice new house.
Yeah.
I don't think those are nice, but that's my thing. But yeah, that's very common. In her case, and even now to this day, when they've done a few successful redevelopment projects, they still haven't renovated their home. They're not doing it to have a more comfortable life. They're doing it to build something of value and pass that on. So when I saw that planning, I actually just joined as part of the planning team, because I'd studied architecture. I'd introduced her to the gardener that I work with, Sano-san.
Oh, yeah.
And so we kind of had this extra connection where we joined the next phase as part of the planning team. And during that time, I'd already been thinking about what I wanted to do in the future, starting this kind of a place. I realized maybe this is the time for me to throw in my hat as well and not just be offering some assistance in planning. To be fair, I don't think I was really offering anything. I was just kind of there. But instead to actually be one of the tenants and then help drive this forward. And so, yeah, it was through that long-term connection, tons of meetings. I was working in Tokyo at the time. I'd come back for the planning meeting once or twice a month. Never got my Shinkansen covered. That shit adds up. It was a lot of cost of time and money, but I was really committed to the project as a whole. And then when I decided to become part of it and actually do something myself too.
Was it latently there, or was there, how premeditated was it? Like at what part along the process were you like, that could be adapted into a space that I would occupy and turn into a business? Whereas it sounds like to begin with, there's almost like it's indiscernible between like simply having a good relationship and starting a business. Like at what point was it like, I could put a business in there?
Yeah, that was midway through. So this took place over a couple of years of just like monthly meetings, talking about it, and then actually getting into the renovation itself. The landlord renovates the structure, and then the tenants renovate the interior.
Right. Okay.
So like, I think probably before any work had started on the renovation, I decided I wanted to jump in. Yeah.
Right.
But
you mean the whole exterior renovation?
Yeah, the structural renovation.
Structural, right.
Yeah. So that was probably 6 months into the planning. But initially, I was even approaching it like maybe I'd try and raise some money and develop the whole thing myself.
I see.
Was sort of what I was thinking about, but it wasn't clear at first what the arrangement would be. If we would buy the parcels ourselves or if we'd rent them. So, there's a lot of things involved in that decision. And one of them mainly is, to me, if I'm going to invest money in something to do a renovation, I want to own it. Like, I think that's a pretty standard way of approaching that. But here it's not like that. Like, the landlord owns the land and the structure, and then the tenants own the interior, which is kind of an old Kyoto approach to real estate as well. Like, the temple would own all the land, but then the tenants, would own the building. But then buildings aren't really worth anything in Japan, especially traditionally. So like, you didn't really have any equity, but you had the right to live on that land. Like, it's kind of a unique arrangement. And then this is kind of a more updated version of that. So at first I was really hesitant because I was like, if I can't buy it, then I don't want to invest in it. But then it was knowing the team, knowing the landlord, and realizing like they're not going to try and screw me somehow. There's that trust that was there.
Yeah, to speak to the relationship, like you say. And I mean, you pointed out that if she was willing to hold off on this for like the principles that she held, where if it was about money or sticking it to anybody or just making a profit for herself, she could have done that already.
Totally.
So, but you don't know that unless you know her. Yeah. So that kind of speaks to the whole relationship developing. And at like its highest aspiration, I'm curious, in a space like this, how many people do you see occupying this with a large, what would you call it, like patronage? Like, how many clients do you envision filling like a space like this at maximum capacity?
At maximum capacity. So we have 6 desks upstairs. So of those 6, I want 3 to maybe 4 being sort of fully occupied at all times. In other words, like we have 2 people who are filling that role now. So 2 of the desks are basically spoken for, where they're kind of here all the time. This is their main office.
Okay.
Another person starting in September. But of the 6, I want 3 to 4 to be that.
Yes.
And then the remaining 2 plus the lounge here as being more open to drop-in members.
Right.
So at any time, it's only going to be, on any given day, probably 4 to 6 people.
Okay.
At any time. So, and what that does is, it's different to a lot of the other co-working spots that are now popping up like everywhere.
That's what
the next hot thing. Yeah.
That's what I wanted to ask, because obviously I've heard of co-working spaces before, but it was you've got to individuate. You got to make yourself some kind of thing. So it sounds like you're talking about that now.
Yeah. Well,
how is it different?
Yeah, exactly. First of all, it's like in a completely different environment. We have a gigantic garden, which is so cool. We have like a 100-year-old momiji tree right outside the window, so you can achieve enlightenment while working. Yeah. Like in the fall when it all turns gold and red, it's like a really beautiful thing. So that's unique. A lot of the spaces I'm noticing are incredibly generic. Like they're not. They have nothing to do with Kyoto. It happens to be in Kyoto, but it's like it could be anywhere. It could be anywhere in the world. It's a generic office room A, and it has no value to me.
I see. You see, that's. I think that's kind of cool. It's like I've been very pro globalization, but at the same time, I really appreciate what pushback more than I used to that kind of thing. Where I was like, come on, no, that means like to me, globalization is representative of like common humanity.
Right.
But then when I've understood the pushback and I respect it now, it's that it basically means that I think I saw a meme on Reddit recently. It's like what we envision Mars to be, and it's like all these beautiful buildings, and it's like very futuresque, and then it's like the reality, and it's got like McDonald's, Starbucks, big like multi-lane like road down the middle or whatever. And I was like, I don't want that kind of globalization. Like it's at the cost of anything having a unique personality, basically.
Absolutely, yeah.
Where it's funny because globalization, I think, comes from cultures that so value individualism. But then what's spreading is actually kind of the exact
generic,
opposite of that.
Totally. So that's for sure. The kind of the approach here is that although the concept is being expressed everywhere now, like it's the tapioca, like the tapioca tea boom of
true,
because there's a ton of hotels here and there's a ton of other businesses that have just suddenly dropped off, and they're like, so instead. We'll just do co-working now, and they've just like switched over, which is fine. That needs to be serviced. I totally understand that. Remote work is growing. Certainly, as an industry, we're happy about that too because it's really true. Like we need to service more remote desks. The problem is that if everything is hyper generic, then there's no value in the places as a place. There's definitely value as like a service office. Of course, we have more of those needs, so we need more of those places. But what's different about Garden Lab is that it isn't just another office. It's like a very beautiful location, and we have a high like meeting room to number of desk ratio. That's actually really important. So another thing that people don't recognize or maybe aren't familiar with, this is going back to my time at a previous company.
We can't say its name?
I can, but it's...
Why not?
No, you can.
It's Appridge.
It's Appridge, yeah.
We said it.
No. I was talking more about Google, but like,
okay, that's fine.
But yeah, Google. What is a lot of people don't know is that Google's really famous for having like really kind of futuristic, cool new offices, which is true. I was lucky enough to travel to a bunch of different places for work and recognize that like they're really cool spaces. But the thing is, what you run into a problem with really quickly is when you're trying to do a more modern, like remote work, constantly doing video calls and other meetings, you can just do them quickly, but you need spaces to do that. So like that style of modern, sort of working across time zone, working with clients in a very responsive, quick way, you need to have a meeting room that you're not making noise. And so even in the Google office is what I found a lot, and I think a lot of Googlers can relate to this, is there's never a meeting room when you need it. They're always booked. People go over time, etc. So one thing that we're doing here is they might be small, they might be individual phone booths, or they might be a larger space, but the number of meeting rooms that are going to be available for people compared to the number of desks is like almost 1-to-1. It's like there's going to be 4 meeting rooms for 6 desks, which is that's crazy. That's a ratio you don't get. And in a lot of the more generic spaces, they don't even like necessarily have, or they have like one big conference room for 30 people and no other meeting rooms, sort of thing. So there's a few things where the first and foremost, we're providing a good service, which is that it's this, we put a lot of love and time into the renovation, and the place is supported by a group of very moral, loyal, loving people to make the space originally. And then on top of that, we're committed to sort of offering better hospitality that's more tailored. It's more of like I almost use the word bespoke. That's gross, but it's kind of like that. It's like it's more tailored to the people that are coming. Like we have a personal relationship with all the people who come in, because we're not focused on volume. We're focused on supporting the right kinds of people that we're in alignment
sort
with.
Of humanizing
the
act of work.
That is the perfect description for what I'm trying to do with Garden Lab, which is I'm trying to humanize entrepreneurship in that way.
Right.
Bringing the Kyoto way of connecting and long-term community connections and trust to a more entrepreneurial, globally scalable model. So you don't lose all of that when you scale up. The fundamentals of your business are still rooted in deep trust in your community and being supported by and supporting your community, but then operating at a bigger scale.
When, what's it all for if we're just like nameless cogs for a number kept in an account somewhere?
Totally. Yep. Exactly. And so, we're trying to do that for the co-working side of things. Also, people can come stay next door. So it's really geared towards folks who are like traveling from Tokyo to visit their clients. Mm-hmm. They can come and stay here as a team. So like up to 4 to 5 people can stay next door. Downstairs is just a giant meeting room where you can do video conferencing. You can invite your customers there, have a meeting, and then you can come over here to the lounge. And what you can't see behind the camera there is like a craft beer server. We've got local craft beer, sake, gin, a lot of things that are made locally here that are really top notch. We have a really great craft scene out here: coffee, tea, gin, beer, etc. So you can invite your clients over and have a bit of an uchiyage, a bit of a party after work. So you do all the work next door, and then you come over here and celebrate for a few hours after.
You've almost, for better or for worse, brought some of the like hospitality industry, like post-work culture, where you finish, but whereas it's people living hard, ride or die in the kitchen, it's like finish that spreadsheet, get down, that's interesting.
It's we're kind of mashing a few different things together here with a bit of hospitality, a bit of a lounge, and then sort of work, a new approach to work.
Now I feel like that automatically connects with people.
Right.
They come in and be like, wow, my workspace is so like inhuman, cold, bright lights. But is that an assumption I'm making, or is that like what people really feel when they come in? Are you getting that kind of feedback? Like this, it's human, and that's why I want to be here, or what?
Yeah, totally.
Or is that like rose-tinted glasses?
No. I think the thing is, I don't think it's for everybody necessarily, because I think there's definitely people who really like that. It's kind of like clean and bright and modern, and convenient above all else. Fair enough. That's a fair.
But this is convenient.
Well, that's
how do you mean?
Well, I just mean like it feels convenient because it feels new and instant. And
I see.
There's a feeling of sort of modern progress that comes in with that sort of a new office, which I've felt. But I so much prefer the human elements of like natural materials as the design.
Yes.
There's power outlets everywhere. The Wi-Fi is just as good as anything in an office. You've got a projector, etc. You have all the modern conveniences, but the place that you're in is almost everything here it's on human scale, and it's natural material. So it's naturally made and reclaimed wherever possible, added on and sort of buttressed with new materials where needed. So it was a very old building before. But it's all natural.
We'll do like a full, I talk about this now on the podcast. We'll do we've been intending like a full, totally for the purpose of touring the building, not that you have an event here or anything like that, but then that people can see. Because I feel like that's totally original, whereas people have seen endless tours of homes, where I feel like you don't see tours of businesses, let alone a business that feels like a home. Like I think if we, anybody who's listening now, it'll be up on the channel. We'll get that there so you guys can get more of the auditory experience of what it's like. But it really is. I mean, I get this feeling when I'm here, like, given the Edison lights, is that what they're called? Like there's almost a feeling, it's almost like you've gone out to the cabin, but you're like, this is a professional place of work, where I was going to ask you, perhaps we can go into that in the second half, but it's almost like I feel like this appeals to what I feel like we're moving towards, which is more this appreciation of like a 4-day work week, injecting into like remembering why it is that you worked in the first place. I mean, of all places to do it that I feel is quite revolutionary as well is in Japan, where there's still this like truly old order, like live to work. It's kind of the antithesis actually, like to do this, but I think maybe it highlights the fact that where people would say, oh, Japan's not ready for that, perhaps it's because they don't have other options, where you just as much have like Japanese clients in here, like that we do want this, but the prevailing culture is so ubiquitous that you'd think there wasn't any kind of conversation going on about it.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And that's certainly what we're striving for, is to be like, sort of be a different, an alternative to that.
Yeah. I think it's kind of pioneering in a way.
Right. Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
But yeah, I always found, so the reason I started this as well was that I always found I actually did way better work in my previous office than I ever did in sort of like the newer, like hipper kind of like tech company offices.
And your previous, to give context for people, was like this.
That's right. Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah. But even not as well set up, because it was, you know, smaller ceilings and stuff, like lower ceilings.
I was going to say that was truly like more the if you want, it was real human.
Yeah.
Where this is that's one thing I will say, to have like my own experience of it as well. Like, I like that it's a meeting of worlds, where I'm like, there's definitely things that just like the staircases in Machia's are notorious for killing people.
Oh yeah, they do. Yeah,
where
kill people all the time.
The fact that this meets the two worlds, it's like, it is modern.
Yep.
That's not done away with, where some people might think like, oh, like just how traditional is it? Like, there's totally modern elements. I mean, not obviously just to the the projector on the roof, but even the height of the ceilings.
Yes, exactly. This is something I thought a lot about. This is a conscious decision based on my last office, which, and actually I still do a lot of my work from that office. That's I spend a lot of my time there.
Yeah.
It's really great for quiet, focused work. Even having that even smaller scale, like that actually has its place. Having a bit of a more dim, less public, lower ceiling kind of a spot is actually really good for that. For focus.
Crossed that we can have this for getting to the lake.
Absolutely.
Even if it rains a bit, if we're set up, then it's fine. So I wanted to ask about, because we're talking about, merging worlds here.
Yeah.
Like, I think we're talking about like the heights of this, that you can potentially get your head clipped off if you're so there was like design decisions that are making it more modern. So I'm curious, like, is that, can you see that in this room? Like, aside from the ceilings, can you draw my attention? Like,
sure.
What are some of the other things that you guys were differentiating, that you're like, we also, we're honoring the traditional, but we're doing different things.
Right. Yeah. So this is actually, you can see the floor.
Yeah.
This is called a doma, or like tataki, which is kind of like pounded earth sort of thing. Like, it's like a form of concrete, basically.
Right.
But, yeah. And so usually you find this in Machiya in like workspaces. So like the orimono is a textile factories that would be in Machiya actually, and there's still some in Kyoto that are like that, still operating. But it's basically like, you can get it dirty, it's easy to clean. And the reason I made this choice is, ultimately, this is a workspace. This isn't a home anymore. Like, it's a repurposed home. But it's a workspace, so I wanted to make sure it was really easy for people to come in and out, especially with being connected so closely with the garden. I wanted it to be almost a single continuation of the garden in that way. So it's just a small gap to get down, but if the doors are fully opened up, it's basically one giant space connected with the garden. And I wanted to make sure that when people were coming in, they didn't feel any resistance. So like having to step up onto a floor or take shoes off or something like that, that's kind of nice once you're in there, but it's a little bit of a barrier.
Totally. No, I think this is something obviously not self-evident, even just looking at us through the camera here, but the fact that this is where, I mean, we're wearing our shoes on, and yet it's still like this elegant solution that doesn't feel dirty.
Right. Yeah.
That I so enjoy it immediately. I don't even think about it, but it is a big distinction that this sort of like common social space is almost like you say, it's very like connected to the outdoors at the same time. Yeah. That like subtle difference. Even that's a cool point about like stepping down into it. It's sort of like welcoming you in, as opposed to like removing you from it. That's interesting.
Exactly. And that's something about Kyomachiya that has always attracted me to them, is that it's sort of a subtle distinction between inside, outside, public, private. Like, it's a little bit looser than it would be in sort of a more modern or like a Western context, where it's like a hard barrier, whether that's a door you have to open to get in, or it's like a wall that's like a solid wall. In Kyomachiya, it's more like there's a noren that hangs down and you kind of brush it aside. But it's like a soft barrier. Yeah. It kind of differentiates inside and outside.
When we went to that, when we were doing the documentary, and we went to one of the big ones that was at their entrance there.
Yep,
which is kind of cool.
Yeah, so that could be in a home or in a business. They might have a soft barrier, but it's still connected very closely. So right now it's way too hot and muggy, but in the fall or the spring, just have it completely wide open. Nice breeze coming through. It's really, really lovely. So
yes,
I wanted to facilitate that as much as possible, but then also have kind of a more modern approach, like it's an office. You walk in with your shoes. Of course, when you want to go upstairs to sit down at the desk and do some focus work, then you take off your shoes, and that's inside now, kind of.
right.
Also, that's for members only as well. This would be open to public sometimes, so public guests can come in with their shoes on easily. They can come in and out easily. But then if you're a member here and you wanted to get a bit more isolation and focus, that's when you take off your shoes, get your slippers, and you go upstairs. And like that act of taking off your shoes adds a little bit of a physical barrier.
Yeah, totally it does.
But
the way that
is all connected. Yeah.
The way that you seamlessly move from the outside to the inside, it's a funny thing, because I'm pretty sure, and I'm not throwing shade here, but I know that like Americans wear their shoes inside a lot. Some of them don't.
Yeah.
So that's like something you take maybe for granted in the US, that you're like, we move from the indoor environment to the outdoor. We have this elevated existence currently,
right?
But in a different way.
Sure,
slightly. Sure. What was I going to ask about? Oh yeah, so this is totally jumping the tracks here, but I was curious. This is all. Would you say it's impossible without bilingualism, doing the business thing? Ooh. I feel like it is.
Yeah, I'd say.
It just is like that's. I want to get excited. I want to like encourage people. Like, start businesses in Japan. Yeah. But I'm like, I think you need to be straight up bilingual at this point. There's just like, and I don't want to even say that there's like a pretense to being more global. It's more just that being more global is accepting that if you want to be global, it means bilingual. And I feel like it's fair in some context, because you're like, globalism, I think in a very like backwards way, as far as business is concerned right now, assumes English.
Yes.
I'm like, that's actually not, that's like a bit colonial. In fact, that you're like, oh, global business is conducted only in this language.
Absolutely.
Where it's like, really, if you were going to truly, like, if we're sharing cultures, then you'd be able to do it too. It really is just that, it's that non-negotiable item, like I definitely see in my experience, where I'm like, even just recently, old opportunity that I had, creative liaison with Google. When I was doing that, I was blindsided. I got a call where they were like, hey, are you ready to speak to like the Japanese team now? I just finished a 5K run. I was literally on the road, like sweating. What? I was like, yeah, okay. I guess like I'm turned on right now, and physically, but also this is a strange time.
Sure, yeah.
And when I spoke on the phone, I could just tell that there was my opportunity was passing me by, because the language wasn't there. And then recently, I got an email from that same company, which like when I went through it, put it through Translate, it was like, would you be free for like a 5-minute call? And I was like, oh, who knows what this could be, just turning over stones. But then I wrote back, and I wrote back in English, where I was like, I would love to have that conversation with you, but just for ease of expression, is it possible we, do this in English? And definitely never heard back from them, where I was like, you're just closing such doors. And I feel like it shouldn't be open. I feel like I accept it as one of these doors. We're not as like an old boys club, but I'm like, just, it's a necessary part of the climb.
Totally.
That you've got to reach that bilingualism, and it seems so prohibitive and like such a gate that it seems unfair at times, but it really, it's liberating once you would do it. I mean, I think that it's awesome, but it's like, it's also not to have your head in the clouds in terms of like, I'm going to start a business and I'm going to do this, like just, without getting into some of the details of like yesterday, talking about just even the bureaucratic registration of things. And
even if you are bilingual, it's insane.
So
I think there's a really good point you've made, which is that either you must be bilingual or you must work with people who are. That you can effectively translate your vision back and forth together and collaborate. Because effective collaboration is 100% a necessity. And if you can't do it, you need to work with people who can. I mean, I don't want to make this a commercial or anything, but that's actually something that we do here. It's specifically because we're trying to bring in innovation and new ideas. We assist startups with that. But it is such a barrier to get in. So people that might have great ideas might be a great fit for the community and have the ability to integrate well, but lacking that sort of ability to actually mesh together, like, and execute.
Yeah.
In the language. So yeah, we provide some support there.
It's not going to happen otherwise.
No.
Which is kind of like pull up your socks.
Yep.
You got to do it.
You got to do the work. You got to hit the dojo. I would say though, just to flip that around as well, for any of us who feel like that's slightly unfair or something. Well, like, what if? Can you imagine going to like North America and starting a business without speaking English?
Yeah,
like you couldn't
right.
imagine.
That's
that.
why I
So,
say it's sort of imperialistic. They were like take it for granted that English is the language of business.
Exactly. Yeah. It certainly helps, but like, have some perspective to like you're going to a different country to start a business.
Yeah.
Like you have to be actively trying to improve your level at least. You don't have to be totally fluent. I wouldn't say you need to be. If you're doing it on your own, you need to be.
Yeah, for sure. So now this will just be fun.
Yeah.
I look around.
Sure.
Obviously, I see this as a full expression of like probably one of the most ambitious dreams you could have. But I like, what if you had no holds barred and you had access to whatever property?
Yep.
Where would you go and what would you do in Kyoto? Is there
Kyoto?
is there a place where you like, I developed like this, I want the garden to be like this?
Oh, I mean,
I feel like I say, a lot of that is here. But I'm like, let's just, let's go to, I want a 200-year-old mummy, not 100.
Yeah, 100 is young and weak. No, that's a really good question. I actually think I wouldn't change much, to be honest.
Okay.
I would expand what we're doing here. But honestly, I'm a huge proponent and believer in expanding a bit at a time.
Okay.
So like, I would want to get this up and running, established, moving smoothly, innovating within that as well. Like what works well in these kinds of spaces. Mm-hmm. I have a pretty good idea so far, but I guarantee there's lots I can learn and improve. Mm-hmm. So like slowly improve that and then expand that model outwards. And in fact, I would definitely expand within Kyoto, but I'd also look for other cities within Japan.
You would, okay, so that's a whole new discovery,
term.
right?
Yeah.
That because I feel it's kind of self-evident. Kyoto, cultural capital.
Yeah.
It has the history of the Machiya.
Yeah.
But just in the same way, you could totally revitalize.
Yes.
Like you were talking about this village.
Yes.
That they've, as opposed to, it's like a hotel village, but it is that. It's a whole village that is a hotel, as opposed to like wipe everything out and rebuild new.
Yeah.
Which I think it's just this cool thing where I like this idea that new business and innovation does not mean every element, every stone is like repurposed.
Yeah.
It's like actually like some of the coolest places. I mean, I draw like a weird fantasy parallel, but it's like you take the ancient tree and then you put the business inside of it or whatever. Right. Like, and you have sweet like bridge paths between the trees. But
that's like an awesome metaphor. That is, I was just trying to think of how I would respond to that, but that's the perfect metaphor that I was going to try and bring up, which is like, you mentioned colonialism. A colonial approach is like, go to somewhere, install new thing based on an existing outside model, and then try and like grow from that.
Yes.
But it's like you're bringing something and placing it in. Yeah. Whereas a grassroots maybe approach would be taking what's there, innovating within that and breathing new life into an existing structure. Right. Hollow out some part of the tree. Yeah. Make a cool tree fort. Yeah, man, absolutely.
And it really does. I mean, it seems self-evident, but again, it is a significant change in the approach. Yeah. Because what it does is it harnesses all that thing's strengths. That's the whole point. Is like, what's not a strength there is obviously that like it existed as a community. Yeah. It has no business worth whatsoever, right? But like if you go in and then you repurpose that, where I was saying, I think it's like significant, like layout of things makes things personal. We're talking about that, the design entering, leaving here, where like, you would then basically, there would just be this underlying feeling that if you have this hotel set up, as you move between, you're not sort of like, when like a Disney, in a Disney place, like say you go to Disneyland, there's a sort of wonder and fun that's there moving around, like the way that it's designed, but there's this like undeniable artificiality to that. Sure. Whereas you would have that like wholesome, like, I feel like I'm linked to something greater and, more like rooted in whatever past experience people had here. But as opposed to being artificial, it's actually real. Yes. And so like making that a part of your business, I think is really incredible. It's like we were saying at the beginning of things, like humanizing
it's weird that's actually the next step, is to actually like take, like actually ancient values and things that we really enjoy, about community, about being personable with each other, just like the enjoyment of a simple conversation. But that's actually a way that makes business more efficient, and like probably more likely to innovate. So it's, well, at the same time, like progressing the idea of business, how you would do it well, but it's based on like just things like it was there in front of us the whole time, like that we want human scale, we want it to feel personable. Like I was telling you, reading the stuff about Caesar, and like and you say about Kyoto here, where a lot of like the most momentous discussions that occur are like in somebody's kitchen. So when you like make things utterly brand new, and it's all like very, as people would like knee jerk imagine what a professional business space is like, it actually is a deterrent to like the most efficient creative space that you could be in. So I mean, it's fun, and I mean, I think in like simple ways, just when you get into like a place like this, like I don't know what it is like exactly, but it totally appeals to me when there's cool spaces they get. It's a space that I would have like built as a sweet tree fort when I was a kid, and then there's that like sort of almost like just childish joy of like the space is cool.
Are you saying I'm a man child? Just made a cool tree? Yes, that's correct.
And that's
100%.
awesome.
That's what I did.
And even the way like that whole like secret world element to it, very, very pronounced in Kyoto. I always get that feeling in like Studio Ghibli sort of films, this like tucked away down this path, what could be down there.
Oh,
it's like a business space, but that business space has taken that into consideration.
Of course. That was a huge part for us, was noticing that we're connected to these old alleyways. And that can be, if you think about a foot traffic business or something like that, that's a detriment, because it forces people to explore, to find.
Totally.
Whereas in this case, we don't necessarily, I mean, of course we're welcoming people, but we don't want a ton of foot traffic coming in and out, because it's a quiet focus space, or like a place for more intimate meetings. So you don't want a ton of traffic in here, but if you know to look for it and you come here, you recognize, it's kind of cool. It's like a hidden fort almost. But then at the same time, himitsukichi is the word. But also you realize,
himitsukichi?
It means like secret fort.
Oh, it does. All right.
But there's tons of those places here. In like on the alleyways, it's like a little secret fort that you find. And there's a cool restaurant or something, or a wine bar at the end of the
I see
alley.
what you're saying.
But when you start working in a place like that, you realize, we're right downtown, and it's quiet. It's so quiet because there isn't that like influx of traffic around, and it's in like the more residential area. These are designed to be more quiet spaces where people live.
It's so true, actually. When I think about it, when I look out of this, like I see the green leaves, I see the garden and everything. It makes me think of like I could be chilling in Akita, on somebody's farmhouse. But we're a little less than 10-minute walk away from like the downtown's most central river.
That's right. If you it's really striking at night if you're working upstairs and it's totally quiet. You open the window, you can hear nothing, and you go downstairs and you walk 30 seconds that way, and it's like a bustling street, and it's loud and like energetic, and you realize it's just that small barrier, that little buffer makes it a completely different world.
Totally different.
There's a word for that, actually. It's shichiu samkyo, it means within the city, living in the mountains.
Okay.
And that's what Machiya Gardens were always trying to achieve, was sort of this sense of quiet, tranquil nature, but within the city.
You see, so that could go in another direction, where when you talk about doing in different places, different cities, I wonder, like, what would it look like to where this is basically like you hollowed out the tree, and then you put a little bit of more modernity in it. That came out strange. But what, like, would you ever think, because I mean, there's no reason you wouldn't do business in Tokyo. Again, it's like not with this sense of aloofness that would prevent that.
No,
but
not at all.
I wonder what it looks like taking the hypermodern, but then putting the tree inside of it. You know what I mean? Flipping it on the other, where I think that would really appeal to me. Like, I like this where it's the tree, and then you put the modernity inside, but then you take the modernity and you put the tree inside.
That's a beautiful way of putting it.
Like I would think of like some cool, like very like space age, like office space for Google, but then somehow in the middle of the building, there's like that garden.
Yeah.
That juxtaposition
Yeah.
would be so cool.
Totally.
You feel like you're on the spaceship, but the spaceship has the biodome inside.
Sure, I see. Yeah.
That kind of thing.
No, I think you're right there. I think a lot of designers will do things like they'll use natural materials. So a lot more wood inside the office is a great touch. But my approach to that would be, of course, use that for sure. Use reclaimed furniture and reclaimed wood and those sorts of materials as detail touches.
Okay.
But then what you said would be try and secure some space for a garden. It doesn't have to be big, but something where you can get more stone, you can get more green.
Yeah.
Tree if possible, or a few.
Dude,
ferns, yeah.
It reminds me like it's not like this place was hyper modern, but I think it's more like we're discussing this kind of thing. And it was the simplest thing when I used to live in Sanmu in Chiba, near the ocean, about a stone's throw away from the countryside school that I taught at, was a gym, very, very minimal gym, actually had a pool as well. That was probably more why people went there.
Yeah.
But when you went into the main area, this is a new building, this community center. In the middle of it was like a squared off, 1x1 space for this tree.
Yeah.
There was then like, all it was like the tree, and it was like open to the air out of the building. But what that put in the building, the fact that it wasn't just like an interior garden that is cut off, like that's another important, like when I think about it, my understanding that I appreciate more now is like the garden is only truly living if it is open to the air.
That's
it has to have access to truly like a connection to the outside. And because they did it that way, just like you would see here, it changed with the seasons. And so sometimes it would be like lush green that you would see inside of there. Or, of course, as it goes to fall, then you would have the changing of the leaves. It was this one tree. I think it was a momiji. It was a classic choice.
Sure.
And then if it snowed, you would have, like, obviously the arrangement of snow that made it look so good, where there's just shouldn't need to be more complicated than just, like you said, like just the whole, like, all you have to do with the concept, aside from, like you said, you can repurpose, like, wood or, like, stone or something in it, and that can be for, like, finishings and stuff. But just put a garden. Put a garden that is open in some way to the outside.
And you nailed it exactly, because it's not having a green thing to look at. That's not what a garden is. What you said, it's the conduit to nature. It's the conduit to outside. So, okay, let's take that example. So right away you have a tree, let's say, and a few stones, maybe a bit of moss and some ferns or something. It's very small. Yeah. But let's just say you have that. If it's exposed to the sun or the sky, then suddenly, rain happens. Seasonal change, airflow, lighting. Lighting is huge. The lighting you get from natural lighting from a garden, like an exposed space, as opposed to artificial lighting, it's completely different.
Totally.
So right away, the whole flavor of the space is different based on the natural lighting. And then again, seasonal change. If it's a lovely season, open all the windows and just get that air breathing through. Then it's alive.
Okay, so there's a great other design choice where I guess that's probably one that they didn't have, but with just the tiniest bit of forethought, when you design, make it that space can then open up into the building.
Exactly.
If I didn't,
these are the sorts of things that I would definitely want to do. That's kind of my thought. In this case, like specifically, there's a large central courtyard garden shared by all the different businesses. So it's really large and is designed to facilitate movement. So like this was a wall here actually, and I was like, no, that needs to be openable at the very least, but probably light coming in all the time, and then human movement through that as well. So we made this into a large like sliding door. I was gonna say, like, that ability to open and then close and have that be opened up, like that's critical. It doesn't need to be a giant garden like this. It could be a very small one.
Sure.
Still have the same.
But you can have access to it. I mean, that it definitely is. You guys wouldn't see here, but definitely a showcase piece to this room is that door doesn't need to be that big.
No.
It doesn't need to be all glass.
Nope.
It doesn't need to let in as much, light and everything that it does.
No, if anything would be there, it would be more like that tiny, you have to stoop to get out. It's like a grated door, which also is very cool. I like that as my escape hatch or whatever when I'm behind the bar. But it's this was a conscientious decision to try and bring as much of that in as possible, or have the ability to do that. You can control the in and out.
That's interesting. Yeah, I have a predisposition, like my tastes. I don't think it's terribly original either. Like the things
Right.
that I enjoy, I think it's like are marketed to a lot of people and we like it. But it's cool seeing this kind of like homey design and everything because I do tend towards the more like I said, sort of like I said the what do you call it? Like our default setting. Like I like tactical. I like minimalist. I like clean lines.
Sure.
Like minimalist right now is super in vogue, and that
Right.
scene is like it's sort of it's cool if you like look through movie history. When you watch sci-fi, it's always a cool indication of how we view the future will be.
That's a good point.
And so, like one of the first, it's interesting the shifts that it's gone through. Like one of the iterations that was very very popular was by Stanley Kubrick, which was Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
And his vision of the future was that what is so in vogue now, sort of minimalist, like Space 2001, Space Odyssey. All of the ships were like hyper clean, minimal, clean lines, very symmetric. Yeah. But then as like our technology evolved into like the 80s and this kind of like clunkier, like our technology was clunkier. Yeah. And then we're like, oh, so I guess maybe the future is like this. Then you could see the sort of 80s imprint on how we viewed what a spaceship would look like. And they suddenly, they became like dirtier and, you know, like more like loose cords hanging everywhere and like less that. Yeah. But then again, I feel like we're seeing, you know, this sort of envisioning again of like this like cleaner look by the people who get eluded. I mean, if you look at like Elon's the one making the spaceships right now. If you look at those spaceships, they're like all about clean lines and like it should just look cool kind of thing.
Sure, yeah. I actually really love the Kyoto approach. There's no like specific Kyoto approach, but something I see a lot here, which I really love, it's a minimalist aesthetic, but it uses like antique furniture, like these chests or something like that, where it might be a single room with like one tatami mat or two tatami mats in front with like an ancient cupboard in the back. Yeah. And then like a single flower stem coming out. Oh yeah. So it's like it's very clean and like maybe the walls and structure are kind of new. Yeah. And very, very clean and minimalist. But the object that is there, it like implies something more. Very lived in, very personal. And like it makes you think about the history of it. Yeah. Did it belong to someone? Who did it belong to? What did it see? And like it has that slightly relict kind of flavor. And so it's minimal and clean, but with implied context. Which is so cool. Like that gives your mind something else to grab onto without cluttering the space with a bunch of stuff. Yeah. So that's a really cool minimalist aesthetic that I love in Kyoto. Yeah, that's a meeting of those two worlds again. My dream, and it's funny because it's like when I think of the house, it's like people will be like, have you thought of the whole design of the whole house? I'm like, no, just one room. Right. That I really care about how it would be. That's cool. And I see this a few times. It's like, and I think these are houses that have been designed like, they're in the forest somewhere around Japan, and they have a main room that basically outside, like one wall basically is entirely glass, and outside that wall is just like a lush green forest. And then you would have obviously your workstation countertop that you'd be able to work at, but is not in any way disrupting the view of this like beautiful forest, which it gives you that feeling like you're living in it. Yeah. You know, if you wanted to extend it further on like one wall, I'm like, maybe you could do it in a way that was like two. It's a rectangular thing, and then two parts of it are glass like that. It just feels so elevated. Yeah. You know, you feel like cool things are going to come out of this. Totally. Yeah. Yeah. Well, some of the great traditional designs as well, like in temples or even in like really nice homes that people like aristocrats or something would have. Like it really is that, except with glass, because if you have glass, it'd be like shoji screens. And then there'd be like a column in the corner that the shojis would meet up with. Okay. So you could close off the room, but then you could either open the shoji screens or just take them out and put them in a storeroom or something. Right. And then you have complete open, like 90 degrees of complete open garden view framed by the roof line. So it just forms this like beautiful widescreen panoramic view of the garden. So there's a few like that are like so cool. Exactly what you're describing, but like the 300-year-old way of doing that. Yeah. And it's there's nothing like it. I've been lucky enough to like go and sip some tea in like some of those places and achieve enlightenment right there. I have not. I'm not even close. Whoever does. Whoever does. No one does. Oh. We can try. Cool.
Cool.
Seems like a natural little break there, maybe.
So, well, definitely, if you guys have listened this far, the order in which I'll release this is this can kind of like whet your appetite for Drew and I. We keep intending to do this, and now we will. We've scheduled it for tomorrow. We're going to do a tour, like you guys like, apartment tours. Let's go. Let's level up. We'll do a tour of this incredible workspace, and that'll follow this podcast. So you can look for it on the channel. Check that out. Get both experiences as time goes on. Drew and I are going to be on the podcast more frequently together. But for now, big shout out. As always, thank you so much to my patrons. You guys are amazing. You mean the world to me, supporting the channel. If you don't already support me there, please do consider doing so. Leave a like and subscribe if you're on the main channel. For all those elsewhere, thank you very much. And thanks again, Drew.
Thanks, sir.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
For now, the clock has run out.